My name is Patrick McCann. I am one of the three co-CEOs of City Century. I am also the Chief Executive of the City of London Law Society. And we are really pleased that you have given up part of your evening to join us today on the first of what I hope will be a really fantastic series that can help you on your way in terms of your life and your career. So just to sort of explain a little bit more about City Century, who we are and what we do. We are a career creation collaboration. We have worked with over 50 law firms, most of them with offices within the City of London, here in big old London town. And we are particularly invested in bringing in, as solicitor apprentices, candidates from across England and Wales and Scotland, and giving them really amazing careers here in London. We currently work with over 40 of those law firms, and between them, we are recruiting somewhere between 130 and 150 roles each year. Probably between our firms outside of London, there are another number of firms roles as well. So it's probably north of 150 jobs that we have going each year. Those jobs tend to go to students who are in year 13. They get offered and they then join us a couple of weeks after they get their A-level results. So would start with us September of every year. Most of our work has been done, our outreach work has been done in conjunction with young professionals. And I imagine you might have found out about our event through young professionals publicity, maybe through all the various social media work that we've been doing, including on LinkedIn. We have been going for about 4 years now. We're really pleased to have almost tripled the number of solicitor apprentices and number of law firms that are recruiting. So we think we've made a real transformation in getting people in to our profession through the solicitor apprentice route. The solicitor apprentice route is for us really important because it is a funded route through to university qualification and then also solicitor qualification, where you work 80% of your time, 4 days a week and 1 day a week. You study, you end up with an LLB, a master's and the solicitor's qualification exam. And around about the age of 24, you become a solicitor. But what's really great about it is that you are paid a salary during that period of time, and your training fees are picked up through a government initiative through the apprenticeship levy, which means you emerge qualified and funded. So you are what we would call a loan-free lawyer. You do not bring a whole load of student-related or study-related debt with you. In year 4, our strategy has been deep impact, and by that we have subsets of that which include that we really want to go wider across the country. So these are jobs not just for people in and around big cities, including London. These are for people in rural, coastal, regional areas as well. So we really want to, we don't care where you come from. We think everybody should have the same opportunity to have these jobs. So part of that is reaching out online. And we've also become really aware that most of our work has been around the year 11, year 12, year 13 group. And we really wanted to go earlier into education and get people interested at an earlier stage. So we have particularly targeted year 10s with this particular programme, albeit we know that there are year 9s, 11s, 12s, 13s, etc., who will be joining us during the course of in2 City. And we welcome you all. But we're really keen that the word gets out there and our jobs become available and attractive to people across the country. And to say the sorts of jobs we have are with the best law firms. They're in the best cities in the country, particularly, of course, London, where I live. You will be working with the best, most exciting, most challenging and most innovative clients. You will have the most fantastic, intelligent, hardworking and impactful colleagues. And you'll be working on some really, really major matters which feature in the headlines, feature in newspapers, feature in the media. So these are really, really brilliant jobs. Also to say that they will be the best paid jobs any 18-year-old will get. And by the time you're 24, you will be the best paid 24-year-old in the country. So all of that is, we think, good news. One of the things we know is in our profession and in other professions, but particularly in the sort of the professional services field, it is difficult for younger students at that sort of year 9, year 10, 11 level to get actual or even virtual work experience, and a number of people will discount themselves out from the process because they don't know what the job might look like, they don't feel they have experience which employers are looking for, and therefore they just go and do other things. We think that's a real shame. We really want you to know that work experience, particularly in-office work experience, is not required as part of your onboarding and recruitment process. It really is that you can get those experiences in lots of different ways. And some experience of work is really, really helpful for sure, but it doesn't need to be in a law firm. It doesn't need to be in a law firm office. And we, Joe Hughes and I, one of the other two co-CEOs, and I were at a careers and enterprise company event a while back, and the government is really trying to make sure that year 11s, year 10s and 11s particularly get access to some sort of work exposure. That there just isn't enough. So our answer was to construct this program, which we are calling in2 City. And we've called it that for a couple of reasons, but the one that's really driven us is that we're using I, as in I, myself, me, whoever you are, this person, and into, and then we've put a capital I into city. And we really want you to think about this is about I getting into the city. These are jobs and roles and futures and careers and lives that you can secure. And we really want to help you to make that happen. So the way I into City works is we will run 10 sessions over the next 5 weeks. They will take place on Mondays and Wednesdays at 5 o'clock. They will go for up to an hour and they will be online. And we really hope that what will happen during the course of that is you'll get a real good feel for what's involved in a career. And there's a flow to how we're doing things. So today's session will be about what is London, what is this town? We know lots of people don't live here, although lots of people do. So we want to tell you a bit about that. Then we want to move on to, in the second session, to what is the City of London, what's this sort of business centre within the conurbation of London, what business does the city do, and then what is city law? What is the sort of law that you will be practicing were you to come and join one of our firms? And then what are the city law firms like who do that work? And what work do lawyers in those law firms do, and who works in a law firm? Who are the people that deliver the service? And then we'll move on to around about session 8. How do you get into corporate law, which is most of what we do, city law, corporate law? What are the routes into that profession? And what are the skills that business law needs? And how can you begin to build those from year 10 onwards? And then we will also be speaking a little bit later in session 10 about how the learning process works once you join us and how you then become qualified as a city solicitor. It's a big, fast, intense program. Please take notes as you go through. We're really delighted that you've joined. What we know is that most people have to get their own careers and secure their own careers. And what we also know is that involves being in virtual rooms exactly like this one. This is the start of something that could be really significant for you. So congratulate yourselves on taking that one step. I really hope that we will meet you before too long in real time and in real places when we run our City Century live outreach events around the country. Please do follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. We give you lots and lots of information. I'm going to now hand over to our project executive and incoming solicitor apprentice, Finlay Sprakes, who has been working with us for the last year or so and who is in charge of the running of in2 City. Finn, if I may hand over to you.
Thank you, Patrick. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to meet you all virtually. As Patrick said, this is a really big step for you in getting this sort of information so early on. I know, looking back to sort of my journey to become an incoming solicitor apprentice, if I'd have known the information that you guys are about to endeavour on through this series, I'd have placed myself in a much better position much earlier on to secure the role. So you're doing exactly the right thing. Just a couple of logistics points from me. So you will have had an email from my work email that gives you a timetable of every single episode, times, dates. And the link is just recurring. So every single time we're going to use the link that you've used to join today. When we've got a session, you'll just jump on that link and it'll bring you to our session at 5 o'clock on every Monday and every Wednesday. when we ran a similar series called Ask CC, which we ran a few months ago, myself and Paul Leamy from the City Century Projects team, we ran that series. A lot of people were always asking us about a certificate of attendance. It's not something we'd thought of before. So it's something we're going to introduce now. And myself and the project team, we've discussed this, and we would like you to have attended at least 8 sessions. So after every session, I get a little report that says who attended what session. And at the end, I will compile certificates for those who have attended 8, 9, or 10 of those sessions, and it will say how many of those sessions you have attended. So if that's something that you're looking at that you can help put on your LinkedIn, you can put in application portfolios going forwards, then make sure you're attending those sessions. Otherwise, not much more for me to say other than you're doing a really good thing so early on in getting this experience. And I'll pass over to Aoife from in2 Shearman for our first episode. Thank you, Aoife.
Hi everyone, good evening. As Patrick and Finn have both said, the first session for this series will be What is London? And I appreciate that, some of you may be from London, from the home counties, and some of you this may be like a totally new city. You've actually not been before, but you want to learn a little bit more about it. So what we're going to do today is I'm not going to go through this like a kind of lecture. It will be very much a bit of an exploration of, what is London? What does the city look like? What are the kind of myths we can bust together, and go through some questions as well. So what I'd like you to do is if you could open the chat function and tell me immediately what comes to mind when you're thinking of London. What do you associate with very London-centric ideas? Maybe it's buildings, maybe it's particular architecture. I'll give you a moment, pop it into the chat. It'll be interesting to see what comes through.
Finn, are you all right just to explain how to access the chat for anybody that might not be immediately aware?
Yep, so at the bottom of your screens, you will have a panel of things that you can do. Aoife or whoever's leading the sessions throughout the series will have things like the chat function, the reactions, and then also a Q&A function. So as we're going through the session, do be engaging with those. So you should be able to put things in the chat, you should be able to react. And then also we've got the Q&A function. So if you've got questions as we're going through, put those in. And when we get time at the end, I'll then feed those questions through to our hosts. So please do be engaging with those. So it should just be on a black bar at the bottom of your screen.
So Patrick has very kindly kicked us off. When he thinks of London, thinks of big buildings, museums, concert venues, businesses and shops. When we have a think about kind of London, this is immediately what comes to mind for me. So, Big Ben, we think of the big buildings, big shopping centres, we think of big football games. If anybody has been following the big Arsenal parades that are happening over the last couple of weekends in the city, we also have a think about, the Tower of London, about the history that comes with the city, the underground, the big familiar buildings. When I asked my friends who are from outside of London this question, just to kind of see what sort of answers they pulled out, got a lot of the London Eye, Oxford Street, it being quite expensive, and it being quite busy. But actually, when we think about London as a city outside of what we would associate immediately with those recognisable touristy kind of big buildings, big recognisable facades, we do actually have so much culture, so much music, so many different food places to go. So the photos we have here are a bit of a kind of exploration of what London looks like outside of that typical touristy face that it might wear. So we've got the St Patrick's Day parade, we've got Notting Hill Carnival, which happens in the summer, Holy at Battersea Power Station, Dragon Boat Racing, which happens down the Thames. The top right there are the deers in Richmond Park. I'm yet to see them in real life, but it's definitely something that I would like to hopefully get onto this year. We've got British Summertime in Hyde Park, which happens every year, and Borough Market. And I think the important thing about thinking about living in London, exploring London, is that you could spend an entire day in certain parts of the city and have such different experiences. You could spend your entire day in Camden or Shoreditch or South Bank, and it would be like a completely different world, even though you go 15 minutes up the road. So London does have multiple different identities depending on where you are, and that could cover things that are maybe more accessible experiences compared to those very high-end experiences when you associate London with things like Selfridges or the big Harrods. A couple of examples of where you might kind of think about where jobs are in London as well, and maybe where people live in London. It all comes into so many different things that you would experience in actually what isn't a very big city geographically, but feels huge when you think about the people and the culture and actually what is on offer in London. So when we're thinking about London as a city, it's more than just the landmarks. There's another side to London where thousands of people come to work every single day. Behind these buildings are industries that you might not see day to day, but they definitely shape how the world works. So it's transitioning from that very fun London of what you experience day to day and as a tourist to actually what work in London looks like. So the photo here, if anybody recognises, is Canary Wharf. So you've got the big banks like HSBC, Barclays, Citibank, JP Morgan, they all live in Canary Wharf. You might have somewhere like Liverpool Street, where the kind of legal and financial district is. I will show you a map on the second slide here. But we also might consider tech firms that sit around the kind of old street area, which is also known as the Silicon Roundabout. And transport is a huge thing as well. Another thing I'll go on to when we're talking about kind of commuting and living in London. But London isn't important just in the UK. It's one of the main global centres for all of the industries that we've got listed on the screen here, which means that the companies here in London are working with clients in New York, Dubai, Hong Kong. Every day you're globally connected, and that work isn't just considered local. London as a financial centre in the world means that there's banks that are residing here that help fund companies globally. The law firms are international. They're working on international deals like companies merging across different countries, across different jurisdictions. Companies like Google, Meta, they've got major London offices, and we're a big hub for media as well. So think of the BBC, film and music industries that are based here as well. But now for the important part, how does London actually work? But this is also where it gets a little bit confusing, because London isn't just one thing. You've got Greater London, which covers basically everything you could think of within London. And then we have this really tiny area right in the middle of the map here that's got a number 1 on it, which is the City of London, which is where a lot of the business happens. So different parts of London actually play different roles. And so kind of breaking one of those myths would be London is not just one place. It's not just Oxford Street and the London Eye. It's also Ruislip Gardens, West Drayton, Morden, Upminster, Abbey Wood. While some people do live more central, so in the more kind of yellow areas there in the middle of the map, it is very common and most likely that people do commute from Greater London, so those darker orange areas around the map, as well as surrounding areas like Essex, Suffolk, Surrey, Kent, the fast trains that go into the city. So you don't always have to live in the borough that you work in, even though that kind of is a bit of an idea of when you move to London, you live quite central, so you can walk to work or you can cycle to work, which is of course really, really helpful. But with that comes slightly more expensive rent, slightly more expensive cost of living. Whereas all of the London boroughs, whether you're central London, Greater London, or even really close within the home counties, all of those transport into the city that's available for you makes your life a lot easier and also is a little bit cheaper as you go further out. One thing that's going to be explored in this series, but I do want to touch upon when we're talking about London as a whole, is what the City of London and the square mile looks like, which is where many of the firms and the banks are. So we're having a look at number 1 there as what would be known as the square mile. I thought it would be helpful as well for those from outside of London to give you a few examples of actually how these boroughs work, and where you find maybe that some might be a little bit more suburban, a little bit more residential compared to some that would be more of the working boroughs. So you would have more residential areas as those kind of outskirts. So I wouldn't say that residential is only exclusive to the ones in darker orange, but I would say that very, very rarely you would find people living in the city, so kind of in the square mile, unless you were a multi-millionaire. So you would have a look at those areas like Bexley, Havering, Sutton and Barnet would probably be more of your residential areas. whereas somewhere like Westminster is very well known for government. Or Hackney is known, Tower Hamlets, for creativity, for tech, for startups. And then you've got Tower Hamlets, which would be the home of Canary Wharf, so the home of finance, and the Isle of Dogs, which is a little bit more residential as well. The idea is that you often live in one borough but work in another. You don't have to live in central London in order to work in central London. One thing that when I was doing the research for this as well that I found quite interesting is that even though the map looks huge and London as itself looks enormous, actually if you're looking at Hillingdon, which is over on the top left, kind of West London side, to the centre of London is only 15 miles. And sometimes if you live outside of London, if you're in a bit more of a rural area or somewhere kind of in a village or a small town, 15 miles is probably something you would be used to doing if that's where you're going to your nearest shopping centre or to school or to college. Or if you're having a day out, those distances kind of don't feel as big as they do when you're in a city that probably wouldn't use transport like cars as much. You would be jumping on the train, you'd be jumping on the bus. I hope that makes sense in kind of terms of the map. I, in my experience when working with trainees and apprentices, do find that people tend to live closer to those kind of yellow areas in the middle of London. But you could be talking about, you know, living in Wandsworth and still having a commute of say 45 minutes into the office. And that's where the zones come in. It's all incredibly confusing when you have a look at TfL. But I think the easiest way to have a look at it is imagine that those slightly more orange areas are going to be where your cheaper rent is, but still very, very reasonable commutes into the city. So I spoke about this small area, the square mile, in my last slide, and this is where a lot of the high level business happens. This is where law firms like ours are based, where deals are done, where companies make big decisions. A&O Shearman is the little green star on the map there, which is very on brand for A&O Shearman colours. We're based right by Liverpool Street. And the square mile is quite strategic for business. If we think about it in terms of A&O Shearman, for example, the lawyers that are in this building, being based within the square mile means you're close to transport, close to different offices, which means that our lawyers are physically close to clients and can travel to their offices really quickly for face-to-face meetings. So if you're having a think about actually joining as an 18-year-old or, you know, as an apprentice or maybe a little bit older as a graduate, we have apprentices and trainees working in these buildings right now. They're studying at the same time, they're working full time, they're getting to know London like the back of their hand. One thing that I definitely recommend apprentices to do or trainees to do, regardless of how old you are when moving to London, is actually just spending a little bit of time walking around the city, and particularly the square mile here, because you tend to recognise station names or road names, and you kind of associate certain areas of the city with certain businesses. So if I ever think of kind of St Paul's, I would associate it with my friends who were at particular firms there as well. That's the station they go to in the morning. That's where we're going if we're meeting halfway, if I'm coming from Liverpool Street and they're currently based in St Paul's. And so you get to kind of know the map of London just by walking it. I think the best way to bring this to life is actually examples of people who are exactly like you, who are already here. So I thought it'd be important to have a think about actually what commuting into the office looks like, as well as moving down and relocating to London. So Ava, who's one of our first year apprentices, does commute into London into the office. She grew up in London. She gave us a little testimony here about actually her favourite parts of London. And why it made sense to her to kind of go to her local city, commute in from home, but stay put where she is. She found London a particularly attractive workplace, as it's considered one of the best cities in the world. I'm from London, I'm biased. I absolutely think it's one of the best cities in the world, having experienced other cities as well. Commuting into the office can definitely be hectic at times. For those of you who have been following the news, last week we had a couple of train strikes, which meant that all of the train lines going in and out of London were a bit of a nightmare, but you make it work. There's other ways of transporting yourself into the office. It's absolutely manageable. And there are so many people in the same position as you. But for Ava, London offered a unique combination of opportunity, diversity and energy, and valuing the pace of life here and the exposure it provides, both in terms of professional experience. As I said, all of those businesses that live within the square mile are within walking distance of the office. They're clients that you're interacting with and friends that you make who live in local areas as well. But not everyone is going to commute. A lot of you will be from outside of London. A lot of you may be from different areas around the UK. And so actually moving to London sounds like quite a scary experience. Cara relocated from up near Manchester, and so the initial kind of process of relocating for her was quite daunting. How do you know what areas to look at? What websites do you look at? And doing it at 18 is even more stressful. It's not the same as when you go through the traditional university path of finding halls in first year, because they're kind of given to you by the uni, and then you've got to know the city over a year. You work out where you live in second year. But trying to do that when you're going straight into work rather than straight into a full-time university degree can be quite scary. So researching different areas was really helpful to her, especially if you're unfamiliar with London, just coming to visit, or, I find it really useful as well. And apprentices and trainees have found it quite useful too, to have a look at the day in the life videos on TikTok for certain areas around London, or videos on Instagram, or talking to people like City Century or your early careers teams at the firms that you're interested in. We will know where to direct you. We've got some great resources, but just starting somewhere like this is a really good idea. Just understanding how the city works and working out, is a short commute important to you? Do you not mind sitting on the train for an hour or so? Would you rather be able to walk into the office? Do you want to live with other people? There's so many questions to consider when you're having to think about actually what living in London looks like. This is the most important slide for today, I think. This shows where all of our current apprentices are actually from around the UK. We do have people from across London, as I said, different boroughs, but also people who commute into London from outside the city entirely. Up until recently, one of our apprentices was commuting in from Ipswich, which definitely took a bit of, get up and go to sit on the train down from Ipswich every day, but it was definitely doable. He has since made the decision to move a little bit closer. But some, as I said, some will live at home and choose to move in later. There isn't one London lifestyle that you need to pick or you need to follow. I think it's important at this point, while talking about London and talking about moving down here, to actually recognise that London is quite an expensive city. It's a lot more expensive than a lot of places around the UK that you may be used to. And so adjusting to a big change in the cost of living can be quite confusing and also quite daunting. But we make sure that you're confident in doing that and that you're supported in managing your own finances. To put that into context, our current apprentices' starting salary is £32,000 with a £3,000 sign-on bonus. And that sign-on bonus is supposed to help you with deposit for flats if you're moving down here, or if you're looking at a flat near home and you want to stay kind of in one of those commuting areas. But we also kind of help you through that process. That's what that money's for. If you're looking at maybe going to university first and then joining us as a trainee, so when you're a little bit older, our trainees at the moment are starting on 56,000 in their first year, 61 in their second, and qualified associate salaries are currently 150,000, regardless of what route you take. So it's definitely a salary that will allow you to live comfortably in London. One of the biggest misconceptions around London, I think, and especially places like the city, is that you have to have come from a certain background in order to feel like you fit in here, which is absolutely not the reality. These are real examples of people who now work in London who started in very, very different places around the UK. You don't have to come from one place or follow one particular path. And there isn't one type of person who lives and works in London. There's a huge diversity of career starting points and diversity of backgrounds, regardless of what industry you're looking at as well. As we looked at in our earlier slides, London is a city of culture. So even if you have grown up hundreds or thousands of miles away from London, you're guaranteed to find people who relate to you and to your background. But also you'll be able to meet new people whose background you've never interacted with before. And I think the kind of overall message here is where you start doesn't determine where you end up. And that's not to say for those who actually might be a bit more keen to stay closer to home if they're not from London, absolutely valid. It's the choice that's right for you. But I think the message I kind of want to push here is that if you're not from near London, you will find people who have had very, very similar, if not the exact same experiences as you. So actually, what does that route into the city look like? This slide might be a little bit confusing. I wanted to just give you a quick overview of actually what the routes into the city look like for A&O Shearman. But I've done this as if you're year 13 leaving school next summer. So if that 2032 is absolutely terrifying for you as much as it is terrifying for me to see as well, don't worry about it. I want to quickly run through what rough timelines look like for you. Though remember, everyone's journey might look a little bit different. There's no race to qualify quickly or to do things by a certain age or to be in London by a certain time. Just remember, you're doing this for yourself. You're not in competition with your peers to see who can get there first. And also remember, they are going to be your future colleagues. As we saw, the square mile was very, very small. Those offices are very close together. And these are people you will be working with forever. I think when people think about careers in law, they often think there's only one route, but in reality, there's multiple pathways that all lead to the same place. And so we obviously offer a solicitor apprenticeship, and a quick timeline for you here is a 6-year programme. If you were to finish year 13 in the summer of 2027 and start the apprenticeship in the autumn of 2027, it's a 6-year programme. So upon successful completion of the apprenticeship, you'll qualify as a solicitor in around 2033. If you were to start university in September 2027 and study law, if you did a normal 3-year undergraduate course, you would graduate in summer 2030. You could start your SQE straight away, the solicitor qualifying exams that Patrick was speaking about earlier. Once you've done these exams, you would join us for a 2-year training contract, meaning you will qualify again in 2033. However, if you decided you didn't want to study law at university, which is absolutely fine, you can study anything at university as long as you come to us with a 2-1 at the end of it. You could start your non-law degree in September 27, graduate in 2030, sit the PGDL, which is a conversion course. It stands for the Postgraduate Diploma in Law, and your SQE, which means that you would start your training contract in, say, 2031, and again qualify in 2033 or 2034, depending on whether you're a March or September intake, but I won't add to the confusion. It's just to reassure you that there are so many different ways of getting into the city and into the firm, and that you can go and experience a life at university across the UK beforehand, or you can come to us straight from school, or you can come to us from London University. Either way, there are going to be people doing this route with you, and people who will be able to relate to your position. And as I said, these dates seem really far away, but remember, you must sit the exams in order to qualify and practice law in England and Wales, become an SRA qualified lawyer. All of these routes are valid. All of them are supported by early careers teams here at A&O Shearman and all the other firms that work with City Century. And all of these routes, as I said, have trainees and apprentices from a huge range of backgrounds from all over the UK and all over the world. So it's not about one best path, it's about the path that works best for you. So I wanted to just touch on the apprenticeship, even though I said, there is not one best path, but again, I'm a little bit biased. But let me break down what our apprenticeship looks like for you, because it is often misunderstood. You are working a real job most of the week. You're studying alongside it. I think sometimes when I talk to sixth formers or to parents or to teachers, an apprenticeship you often associate with going straight to work, which is true. You are going straight to work from school, but you are still gaining a university degree alongside it. So it's just important to keep that in mind, that you still need those stellar academics. You still need to be able to have fantastic time management in order to balance both. So an apprentice in A&O Shearman might spend 4 days working in teams like corporate, finance, dispute resolution, and 1 day studying with our university provider BPP. They're earning a salary from day one, so they're gaining experience and financial independence at the same time. Our apprentices work alongside our trainees lawyers. They're not separate. You're not watching, you are in the workplace from the start. So across our 6-year programme, from years 1 to 4, you're studying for your undergraduate degree with BPP. Mondays are your uni days, Tuesday to Friday you'll be in the business. You'll learn all about the English legal system, client care, contract law, and all of the other subjects that sit within a law degree. and our apprentices typically rotate seats every 6 months. So by the time you end up finishing your apprenticeship and qualifying, you've experienced so many different areas in the business that our trainees wouldn't get in their 2-year rotation, 2-year training contract doing 6-month rotations. But throughout your time studying, you'll receive coaching skills, development training, including legal research, professional conduct, ethics, mentoring, as well as all of the mentoring and buddy systems you will receive in-house as well. When it gets to year 5 and 6, you'll join what would be the traditional trainee cohort. So you'll focus on SQE preparation and exams at BPP. When you join that trainee cohort, you'll be joining a cohort of around 35 to 40 trainees. And as we looked at the timeline before, regardless of whether you're doing the apprenticeship or the kind of graduate route into a training contract, you're all going to be the same age anyway. But I do just want to push that a little bit more as well, is that you don't have to be a certain age in order to do these things. Obviously, with the apprenticeship, there's kind of levy considerations, but for those who go through the university route, there's no rush to get this, straight into university, straight into the SQE and training. You can go at your own pace. There's gaps to take. Some people decide they want to be a lawyer much later on. When you get to years 5 and 6, and potentially even earlier than that, there's client internal and possibly international secondments available for all of our apprentices and our trainees. So we've talked about what London is, but more importantly, how it actually connects to those opportunities. So the real question here that you want to take away and think about is, where do you see yourself in that? Have you explored all of London? Have you even been to London? And realistically, you're not going to go around every single borough in London and every single tourist attraction and, area available, even if you're from London. But have you considered exploring London outside of the typical tourist areas? Again, as I said, social media is so good for this. I think the most important questions, which I would ask you and which I would ask my friends who are from outside of London who have moved down here, questions they ask themselves when they're making these decisions at 18 or 24. Can you see yourself working in London? Can you see yourself living here? Can you see yourself making friends here? What actually interests you about London as a city? Hobbies and social interests might expand in a larger city where there's more to do. So Ava, when she was talking about her favourite things about the city, spoke about the theatre. And that's something that I think, when you consider London as a workplace, but also somewhere to live, is that I say London may have been considered a 24-hour city before COVID, not so much now. Things tend to close around 11 midnight. But you are going to have a show to go to every evening if you really, really wanted to. There's always somewhere new to go for something to eat. There's always a festival to go to. There's always a concert to go and see. I've noticed a lot of kind of mixers that appear now as well, for those who want to go and listen to speakers, those who want to go to lectures, where you can meet like-minded people from around the city, or kind of meet new people as well. I know I've kind of flown through a little bit of an overview about London, but, has your perception of the city changed, kind of considering what the work looks like, where the offices are, and what your future career could look like? London isn't just a place you visit. For a lot of people, it becomes where they build their future, or where they call home. And there are a lot more ways to get here than people realise. I asked around a couple of what words immediately come to mind for those who don't live in London or haven't moved to London just yet. But the answers I got were: London is diverse, it's global, it's full of opportunity, and it's not limited to one path. As obviously your spokesperson for moving to London, I hope your perception kind of has changed. Maybe if you're from outside of London, or maybe you're from the home counties and Greater London, you didn't really consider working in the city. But it's good to kind of keep, your options open. Actually, what is important to you in a future career? What's important to you in a workplace? And what does London offer as, somewhere that houses all of that for you? I know I've gone through this, as I said, quite quickly. I'll stop sharing my screen, but I wanted to kind of put it back to you who have joined today for the first session. Are there any questions that you might have? Maybe there's something that you've heard about today that sprung a couple of thoughts to mind, or any of the panelists, if you would like to add about your experiences of living in London. I know I spoke about a lot a lot about what my friends said about having kind of moved here, but in my personal experience, I chose to move away from London for uni to go and experience somewhere different. Absolutely loved my uni city, but missed London so much. Came back and I lived in Essex for a while as a really great commuter city. It was also a lot cheaper than living in London. But I'm a big fan of the city. I will be here for the rest of my life. So being an advocate for London is something I'm, absolutely going to be going for. But I don't know if you want to add anything, Patrick, or maybe Finn, because you'll be making a big move down here as well. If anything,
either I will, if that's all right. I mean, I moved up to London to go to university at the age of 17, and I came up because I just thought it was the burning centre of the universe, and like so much happened. And I came from a very beautiful coastal town, but everyone was about 300 years old there. So I wanted to come to somewhere that was a bit more youthful. And I really, really liked how you've explained London, like, what happens there, the events, how it's all constructed, the geography, the lifestyles people can have here, how much money might be involved in living here, and I love the fact that you've got all these origin stories from your solicitor apprentices who started in or are now in London. So I thought all of that was really helpful, and then I liked that you were doing some stuff around. Could you imagine yourself being in the city, and what would the city give you? So I had two questions for you, Aoife, if I might, and maybe Finn, you might want to answer one of them as well. So my first question is what is it that the city particularly gives you? Like, what made you come back, albeit to Essex and then to London? What are the two or three things that you think it's going to give you? Finley, same question for you. And then you mentioned about, think about the sort of person you are and what you want. Tell me a bit about who you think just London or a big city just wouldn't be for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to jump in first. So I think one of the biggest things for me about London, I mean, the clue might be with my name as well. My parents aren't English, and my parents moved from Ireland to London when they were
I've got Irish name too, Aoife. There you go.
When they were in their early 20s for the opportunity that London gave. And so my sister and I have grown up with my parents regularly reminding us that they came to London for a better life and a better opportunity. However, I really appreciate that I've had such a close relationship to then going back to Ireland basically whenever I want to, because the rest of my family are there, to see the total opposite of London. My family are from an area of Ireland where if there is a storm, you have no internet connection for 3 months. And so when I go over there, I appreciate the break. I appreciate the non-polluted air, but I miss London. I miss the convenience of London. And I think because I've grown up around that, I grew up in East London, I'm used to things just being there for me. They're always there when I need them. I'm very lucky that I didn't grow up in the countryside, where I say very lucky in that I consider myself lucky now, because as much as I love to go and have a break for the countryside, if there's not a Sainsbury's at the end of the road, I will go into crisis mode. But the convenience of London is something that is absolutely going to keep me here. My friends who work in corporate in different cities around the UK, the pace of life for them is slightly slower, even though they do get that corporate experience. Whereas I like that things needed to be done yesterday. I like working in a city that physically feels like it's moving fast. I'm moving quickly with it as well. And so I will never regret kind of coming back. I'm glad that I got to experience a different city to see what that was like. But also outside of the convenience, like the arts and the culture that you have in London, it's always going to be the home for first tours. When you have shows and musicians, you're always going to get a band that comes to London, which unfortunately my friends who live in different cities don't get to experience. They're always coming down here for it. So if music is a big thing for you, like it might be for me, London is absolutely somewhere where you're always going to have that. But Finn,
my next question was, who would it not suit?
Who would it not suit? Now, I also have friends who absolutely point blank refuse to move to London, and that's fine. It means that I then get to drive to South Wales every couple of months to go and see them. It won't suit somebody who loves a drive to work. If you like the idea of jumping in a car to be able to go to work, then London, that's not where that's going to happen unless you're driving to the train station. I think somebody who's not massively keen on, I think London does come with a bit of a reputation of suits and ties, which isn't necessarily, I mean, hopefully I'm kind of also feeding into that today. I've got quite a nice jumper on because it's a little bit cold outside, but I'm in the office. It's very casual. It's very comfy. But I think somebody who doesn't like the idea of kind of, I like that I'm constantly switched on to something. I like that this is a very buzzy city to live. Whereas my friends, I think the best way of describing this is if you like to go to bed in the evening and it be pitch black and totally silent, then London's not for you unless you live in quite a quiet area of London. Whereas I'm used to streetlights being on 24 hours, I'm used to buses going outside the front of the house. So I think if you're more of a kind of maybe a bit of a home bird, maybe somebody who wants a slower pace of living, you're not going to have that in London. But that's not to say that there's not an opportunity for you on a Friday evening to go out to the countryside and spend a weekend, maybe in a nice Airbnb with your friends, and then come back on Sunday and start again. But you know, my friends who can't stand the fact that there's a street light outside my house, London's not for them.
Got it. And Finley, question to you: just what's brought you to London?
Well, I think if I was to sort of sum up that in one word, what does London mean to me in the move from, so I'm from a very small town in Yorkshire, in East Yorkshire. And the move really represents opportunity for me. And I think where I see my career going in a commercial law firm, the opportunity is just not there in this little small town in Yorkshire. And I'm very proud to be from Yorkshire, but I'll go for a walk with my grandma, for example, is a great example. We'll go out for a dog walk around my little village, and she knows every single person in every single shop on every single street corner. And we've only done about a 10-minute walk, and it's taken us nearly an hour because she bumps into someone who she maybe went to school with 50 years ago. And she's, how are things going? How are the boys? And that isn't really where I see myself. Me and my friends, we've probably gone to the same pub our entire time at sixth form and our entire time since. And it's not kind of environment I want. The same people are everywhere. Whereas I quite like the exciting idea that I might be on the tube and I might be on one side, I've got someone who's an investment banker, and then the other side, I've got someone who's on Broadway and is now moved and is on the West End, and there's all these people from different walks of life. And you don't know what conversation you're gonna have, and that's really, really exciting for me. And I think going back to Aoife's point about music, so I'm near Hull, and we did get Coldplay actually, not too long ago. So that was a big revelation for us. But the idea that one week you've got Harry Styles, then Taylor Swift's there, then the Killers are there, then there's a Beatles tribute act the week after that. There's so many things to do. Whereas I sort of find myself in the area I'm going to. I go to the same restaurant a lot of the time. I go to the same pub. I go to the same place to post a letter, whatever it is, all these repetitive things, the same corner shop, buy the same drink from the same corner shop every morning on my drive to work. So it becomes a very repetitive process, which isn't what I like. And my friends absolutely love that. And they say, I know this town. I know the house on the street I want to live on when I can get my own house, and they've got it all sort of picked out. Whereas I quite like a bit of an exciting approach to. I don't know where I'm going to end up. I don't know who's going to be where. But all I know is that I'm going to have a very fast pace, a very dynamic environment, constant challenges. Like Eva said, it feels like whenever I've been to London for assessment centres, for apprenticeships, it feels like everything needed to be done yesterday. And I absolutely love that because it's a bit of a kick up the bum, right? I need to get this done. Then I've got to get done this. Once I've done that, this is my next project. And you're constantly thinking 2 steps ahead, which really, really excites me, I think, Patrick.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Just a reminder to those of you who are on the line, if you would like to use the chat function to ask your questions, that'd be really helpful. You've got one of the best early careers advice specialists in law firms in London here. Aoife is really a standout star, and it's a really good opportunity for you to ask a question. And you've got Finn. Finn has secured himself as a city legal career, right, which is not an easy thing to do. It is easier to get a law place at Oxford or Cambridge than it is to get a city century solicitor apprenticeship. So useful to have these people. So we'd really welcome a question now. We're just going to go for another couple of minutes.
We've got some questions in the Q&A, Patrick, actually.
Amazing. Let's go.
I'll feed them through to you then, Aoife. So we've got one from Lucy. Did you find being young working in London daunting, and how did you take it? How did it take you to feel settled and build a strong rapport in the area you were working? It's a great question.
So I obviously grew up in Greater London, and so I remember obviously a very niche point of view here, but I remember sitting in like form and my form room window looking out onto Canary Wharf, and you just know that, okay, when I'm done here, when I'm done with my schoolwork, when if I go to uni, whatever I end up doing, I will be there. Like, I know I'm going to work there, and it's something that I physically had every single day to remind me that's where I'm going to go afterwards. And you know, as I said, my parents aren't English, so I didn't have that kind of parental support for somebody who worked in London, coming from a very socially mobile background. So I kind of just had to work it out myself. And so the most daunting part about, so I started working in the city as soon as I left uni, so I was freshly 21. And I felt very young going into London then, but I also did consider the apprenticeship route as well. So I do have experiences of both, in that I was offered some apprenticeships at 18, in the kind of finance world as well. So I would have been having the same experience regardless. What I found most daunting was I had no idea what to wear. I had no idea what I was supposed to be wearing going to work. I had no idea, you know, what the kind of hierarchy of what you wore to work meant as well. And by that, I mean, like, I think it was easy enough when my male friends were going to work in London, they could chuck on a suit and tie, or they could chuck on a shirt and tie. Whereas I found it a little bit more like, do I wear a dress? Do I wear a skirt? Do I wear trousers? Like, I'm listening to my parents' perception of London, which is very much stuck in the 90s, if you have to wear a pair of heels to work, which is absolutely not the case, by the way. I think the most daunting thing for me was actually, people don't sound like me sometimes as well in more of the like prestigious environments. Like, I think I've got a bit of a telephone voice on stage to do a presentation, but you tend to find that some accents just land differently. And so where I have a bit more of a kind of estuary accent, it was hard to see representation of very, very senior figures in a workplace who sounded like me. So I found that quite daunting as well, of, God, I don't know who I'm supposed to look up to here. I've got no family members. I've got no one who sounds like me in a workplace. But actually that subsided really, really quickly. And I do think that going to work post-COVID also really helped me out. So I graduated in 2021, went to work straight from there, where actually the office environment was different to what it was pre-COVID. People were in less, people had more of a relaxed dress code. It was a lot more about building connections, because people lost those connections during the pandemic as well. It was scary. Like, the first couple of weeks of going up London were a bit like, oh my God, what if the train doesn't come? What if something goes wrong? But, you know, I look back at it now, and I've been doing it for 5 years, and I honestly couldn't see myself doing anything else.
Thank you. Finn, other questions? And
Yeah,
sorry, I think I said put this thing in the chat, but apparently it goes into the Q&A function. So apologies for misleading people.
so okay, yeah, we have got a few minutes, so keep putting them through into the Q&A function if you've got them. I've just answered one in chat, so just to touch on that, Lucy asked again, do apprentices get to work in all law departments in a firm throughout the apprenticeship? So I'm joining a firm called Stevenson Harwood. The way that they operate it is that for your first 4 years, 1, 2, 3, and 4, you will sit in a seat for 1 year, then you'll rotate, so you'll get to see 4 different areas of the law in your first 4 years. Then going into year 5 and 6, that would also be the training contract stage. So if you had gone through the university route, that would be when you would join the training contract sort of cohort. And at that point, you swap every 6 months over 2 years. So in 2 years, you would see another 4 seats. So at the end of my apprenticeship, I will have seen 8 areas, and I will have a really good idea of where I'm going to qualify. And I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that, Aoife or Patrick?
Kind of the same. So the apprentices, when they rotate around our programme at in2 Shearman, will sit in all of the 4 practice groups. So corporate, finance, ENRI, and the other one has completely escaped me, disputes. But within that, you may sit in maybe 2 finance seats or 2 ENRI seats. So that could be something like real estate finance, capital markets, for example. But the idea is that you have such a well-rounded experience of different seats within the business that when it comes to the idea of qualification or specialising, you have got that experience in order to make that decision. It's also building connections around the firm as well.
Thank you. Been another question?
Yeah, as someone who commuted and chose to stay in London, if you had not done this and stayed somewhere small, do you think your opportunity would have been the same, Aoife?
I want to be very careful how I answer. No, if I'm being completely honest. So I knew that I wanted to work somewhere that was very, very corporate. So magic circle firms and kind of investment banks were the only thing that I would really consider. And I will say as well that obviously my route is slightly different because I'm not a lawyer. I went to uni and did history and politics. The idea was that I wanted to work in government, but post-COVID, that was just not an option. So I went to the corporate sphere instead, which is I knew ultimately where I was going to end up. I think if I didn't live in London, I would have gone to New York for the kind of opportunity that corporate would offer. I really, really wanted to stay in Cardiff after I finished university, but I think my role actually might be a good example of this, not massively helpful for, the aspiring apprentices and trainees who are on the call, but I have such a specialised role that wouldn't really exist in the smaller firms around the UK. So you would find that somebody who's looking after, say, apprentices like I am, they would also be doing quite HR generalist things. So they might be offering PA support, they might be doing HR advisory work, whereas my role solely sits with just apprentices and trainees. And I think that should I have gone to a firm in Cardiff or maybe gone up to Manchester or to other cities around the UK, I would have had a much more generalist role, which would have meant maybe hands off with the apprentices, whereas now I get to know each of them by name, by background, everything about them throughout the recruitment and onboarding process. But I did genuinely consider staying in Cardiff after uni. I absolutely loved it. It was more COVID really disrupted what my plans were. But I think had COVID not happened, I maybe would have stayed there, but I think I probably would have ended up somewhere like New York, maybe one of the big German cities as well. They're kind of up and coming financial centres. But ultimately London was always going to be somewhere to come back to.
Great. Do you want to leave it there for now, Patrick, or?
Yeah, I think, look, I think what I'd add is you can get to know a lot more of this as you go and you meet different law firms and you'll hear more stuff about it. But the general reality of it is if you can start in a big city, you can move out more
Definitely.
easily, unless your area of law is something that's really practiced in smaller towns. So family immigration, housing, debt, any sort of individual retail type consumer type law you could do locally, but if you want to do big laws, big organisations, big governments, big structures, etc., starting in a big city is a really good way to do it. It's sort of a bit more difficult to start in Bradford and move to London later.
And
Finn,
the thing is,
I think we might have
will
time for
always
just
be
one.
home.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Patrick.
Sorry.
Home will always be home. And so if you end up moving to London as a student or a graduate or a trainee, you can always go back. You can always move back. And that's what I say to my friends who have made the decision to move to London as well, is home will always be there for you. If you're tired of London after a few years, you've got that experience behind you. And you can, as Patrick said, take it back to your hometowns and cities if you would prefer to go somewhere smaller.
Yeah,
Thank
right.
you.
Looking at the other questions that we've had, Patrick, we've had quite a few sort of talking about the traditional route versus the apprenticeship route, A-level grades, things like that. So I have answered some of those in the Q&A function. I've typed some responses to those, and I think that's really important to note that if students join in for all the sessions, those will be covered in quite a lot of depth at later sessions. Was mostly the feedback that I was giving, and obviously Aoife did an incredible overview of the apprenticeship route. A lot of you asking about the traditional route. If you dial into the future sessions, we'll have a really clear breakdown of those as we progress through the episodes.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, to say to all of you, what City Century does is specifically around solicitor apprenticeships, and we bring a collective offer. But each of the law firms will be recruiting trainee solicitors through the traditional route, and you'll get lots and lots of information about that from those law firms. But also there are 2 or 3 major websites that you should be looking for. Aoife, you'll correct me if I'm wrong on any of them, but I think Legal Cheek is possibly the main one. Lawyer to Be would be another one.
Bright Network, Prospects, Early Careers sites, Times Top 100. God, loads of them. Even if you typed in something as simple as kind of early careers opportunities in law in London, you get a lot of firms popping up. But as a kind of entry level bit of research, I'd have a look at Legal Cheek, have a look at the most list.
Brilliant. Finn, any more?
Questions, just so let's check. a lot more about A levels, so things like what subjects are beneficial to choosing your A levels, if you'd like to do law in the future, talking about how A levels influence your career progression and the opportunities within fashion. And as I've said, those will be answered in a lot of depth in other sessions. I'm not sure if there's anything you want to quickly add to those, Aoife.
I think if you want me to just quickly jump in, just because they're burning questions, I don't want them to have to wait a couple of weeks. From the early careers point of view, I'm not too bothered what you do for your A levels, to be honest, as long as you meet the eligibility requirements for whatever firm you're applying for. That's absolutely fine. We look at IB, we look at T levels, we look at BTEC as well, because they're all A level equivalent. One thing I will say is that it's the same advice I would give you if you're going to go to university. Go and do something you are genuinely interested in studying, because you are going to do better when it comes to exam time. And I would much rather you come to me with a really strong 2-1 or a first in something you're genuinely interested in, like English literature, history, or business, or a language, rather than coming to me with a law degree that's not fantastic because your heart wasn't completely in it at that point. You would be much better off studying something you're interested in, doing a conversion course, and then doing the SQE. In terms of I will kind of caveat that with saying that if you are doing something like we have seen like BTECs in tourism studies before, or hospitality, they're a little bit more difficult to kind of pull out the transferable skills. Not impossible at all, but a little bit more difficult. So if you're thinking about what A levels you might want to do, I think anything that's kind of essay based or literature based, even if it's one A level subject, is massively going to help you when you're in such a literature heavy career as corporate law, or the other types of law that you come across as well. And if you don't have a very literature heavy A level, or IB or T level, I would maybe consider doing an EPQ just to build those writing skills. Be wary that not all firms accept an EPQ as an A level equivalent. However, it's great skills that you will develop by doing that. So I would still consider it. I think it's the equivalent of an AS level. It's also good fun. Like, I love to know what people are doing their EPQs in. So I would definitely recommend. But you can come from any academic background, as long as you've got what we're looking for. I'm happy for all the A levels to come through.
If I just
Amazing.
touch on the end of that as well, I think by being on these series, you're asking all the right questions right now, because I took physics for an A level. When I came out of my GCSEs, I took physics for an A level, absolutely hated it, didn't do very well in it. So then I had to swap it to English, which set me back a little bit. It's delayed my process by a year. So if I'd have been on this call when I was in year 10, year 11, even year 12, going into those sort of critical periods of selecting subjects for A levels, I definitely wouldn't have done physics. I'd have chosen English from the start, and I'd have been sort of a year ahead in the process. So it's really good that you're coming on and asking those questions now, and you've got people with the experience of Aoife and Patrick to answer those questions. But that's all from the Q&A function, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Thank you so much for your time. We really hope that we'll see you again on Wednesday, and then every Monday and Wednesday, 5 o'clock for the next 5 weeks. Aoife, thank you so much for such a blisteringly fantastic presentation. Really, really grateful that you did that for us. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Bye.
Aoife.
Hey, Joe.
My
Hello.
gosh, you're good. My gosh, you're good, Aoife. You, Patrick, Obbs.
You were great, Aoife. That was so good.
Yeah, just
So
dropping out now.
good. So good. Thank you so much, Aoife. I'm so happy.
It's okay. I feel like I've had a conversation about moving to London with literally every single person I ever know, because I'm such a die-hard live and die in London.
No, you are.
My friends who moved down here after uni never had this when they were at school. And, you know, when you've grown up in somewhere that's so far away from London, I think